This is Marco Reus.
This is Shinji Kagawa.
This is Nuri Shahin.
Hello, this is Jadon Sancho.
And you're listening to the Yellowwall podcast.
Hello and welcome to episode 464 of the Yellowwallpod. I'm your chef Botzko, and today we'll talk about Borussia Dortmund dismantling Köln 4-0 in Köln. And of course we will preview the next game against the relegation candidate against VfL Bochum on Sunday, and in between we will also talk about the Gio Reyna transfer that might happen or not happen. For that and more, joins me Lars Pollmann. Hello Lars, how are you doing?
Hello Stefan, I'm not gonna lie, I'm very tired, didn't get a good night's sleep, so I apologize in advance if you have to cut out any of my yawning.
Yeah, I don't know, I've time to edit this well enough. So first of all, apologies, apparently the last time I published this episode with just the left channel working. Not quite sure what happened there. I will make sure that this episode will be mono and on both ears available. Not quite sure how I messed this one up, but yeah, I thought I should apologize for it because I also didn't find the time to correct the error. But Lars, let's just get to the game itself, and I must say I was positively surprised by a lot of things. Of course, Ian Maatsen having a nice tactical wrinkle. It's a little debate on Twitter whether it was Shine's idea or Tesic's idea, who really is to say, but Lars, what did you think about him playing like an inverted fullback role through, I would say, half the time of the game?
Yeah, I mean, basically in possession, which I suppose is how that role functions. I think it's been all the rage for a few months now, especially in the Premier League. Man City doing that quite often, Liverpool at times, Arsenal. So having such a technically proficient player on the left wing obviously allows you to do that. I don't think there's anyone else at Dortmund whom you would be reasonably comfortable in that sort of role. Maybe Matteo Murray, just from a technical standpoint, but I don't know if it's necessarily important who came up with it. It was certainly a good idea against an opponent which you knew you were fairly likely to dominate in terms of possession, which I never actually looked up the numbers, but I think they probably did. And yeah, I don't know if I was necessarily as positively surprised as you were, because quite frankly I thought the first half especially was quite poor from both teams. And then the first 15 or whatever minutes,
I said there were positive surprises because I'll be honest, I expected a very similar game to the Darmstadt match, and so little improvements are already surprising me. I don't know if I would classify this as a great performance.
I mean, clearly it wasn't. Especially the first spell after the halftime break. They were a bit open at the back. I think a better team than Cologne probably would have punished them. I mean, there was the big chance for, I think, Thielmann, where Kobe saved a one-on-one, where I think Henry Blank on his debut possibly made a bit of a positioning error, which, fair enough, he's 19, Bundesliga debut, so some growing pains to be expected. And then Cologne also hit the post in a weird situation where I think, outside of the guy taking the shot, most players thought a free kick had been given. That's also the impression I got on while watching on TV. I was pretty sure that the referee had blown his whistle, but he didn't. So big let off for Dortmund. And then I don't know how much later the second goal happened, and that basically decided the game. I think, given Cologne's struggles, having scored 11 goals in the first half of the season, they were never going to come back from 2 goals down against Dortmund. And from then on, I think it was a fairly solid sovereign, as we would say in German, performance from Dortmund. But just after the second goal.
Yeah, no, I would agree with that. I thought that it was, first of all, nice to see a set-piece routine work out for the Black and Yellows, because that did look like something they studied or trained on a training ground. So good for them. And do you think it was a penalty or a dive by Jadon Sancho when he was brought down? I actually thought it was a penalty, but I feel like if I was on the other side, I would be complaining against it. So I think you said on Twitter that VAR won't overturn this decision either way, and I think that's probably right.
Yeah, basically, to me, this is one of those, if we can, take an NFL analogy, so to speak, that call was going to stand or whatever it was. I think you can certainly make the argument that the defender held on to Sancho just that split second too long, which, quite dumb. He's not going to towards goal immediately anyway. It's not like there's a huge chance you have to take the emergency exit, as we would also say in German. And at the same time, I think you can definitely also make the argument that Sancho made a bit more out of it than it should have been, given, the intensity of contact and all that. I think, as I said, if the referee says that's not enough, I would say fair enough. If he says, defender, you are just plain stupid in this moment, so I'm going to punish you, that's also fair enough to me. So, while we would always like consistency from referees, I think this is just one where the guy makes a judgment call and it's neither 100% wrong nor 100% right, so let's just stick with the call on the field. And the only thing I'll add is that I'm pretty sure a player like Karim Adeyemi feels a bit hard done by, because there's been much more obvious, let's say, fouls and not just, dumb defenders towards him, and he hasn't gotten those calls. Maybe it's, the Sancho effect, or maybe just the referee, having Dortmund glasses on in that moment, if you will.
Well, I mean, as someone who's watching the NBA a lot, and shout out to Joel Embiid for scoring 70 points the other day, because I was in the arena and it was a really special occasion. There is certainly something like a superstar whistle. I think we've complained about it at length, but I think Jadon Sancho certainly has something like that going for him right now, and good for him, I guess. And good for Dortmund, of course, because as you said that Adeyemi 100% would have not gotten this call. He definitely would have rather been booked for a dive than gotten a penalty call there. Also interesting that the pecking order of who's to take the penalty is now more set in stone than ever at Dortmund after the match day that never happened. So Füllkrug did not allow Jadon Sancho to score his first goal for Dortmund since his return, but started away excellently. I liked the little hezzy. Back in the day, I didn't like it because I feel like I've seen them go wrong too many times, but I thought it was a well-executed goal, and of course, after we talk about the second goal, I think we, of course, have to talk about the third goal and the outrageous pass from Ian Maatsen just after he lost the ball, recovered it, and then he said it himself in the post-game interview. There was one of those moments where you don't think, just do. And the way he found Malen with this pass, I don't know really how to describe it, how I was in my own feelings, but it really felt like a sip of water after a long walk through the desert, for sure, because I don't recall many of those kind of passes, these Hollywood passes that I just absolutely love. In recent memory, and for him to whip out like one like this was certainly unexpected, and the fact that it wasn't even offside, even close to being offside, and Malen to slot it away made me just really, really happy. That to me was certainly one of my favorite moments of this game. I don't know, Lars, if you thought that Ian Maatsen had this kind of pass in him.
Well, I'll be the first to tell you that I don't religiously watch Burnley, where he spent last season on loan from Chelsea when they were promoted to the Premier League, and then obviously he barely played for Chelsea the first half of this season. So my prior knowledge of his quite limited, so I wouldn't necessarily say that I was 100% aware of his passing range. And while I don't want to be like, the wet blanket or whatever, it kind of feels
Don't
like
be the wet blanket.
It kind of feels like Cologne shouldn't be conceding that goal. I mean, you're 2 goals down, and the issue for them was, I think, that Maatsen first lost the ball, so Cologne,
they were pushing up, yes.
pushed up, and then obviously he regained possession, but still, I mean, there was quite a bit of time left on the clock, if memory serves, so you shouldn't be, all out and getting caught on that break. But yeah, that's just nitpicking. We can also admire a nice pass and a composed finish by Malen, seeing as those have also been, at least at times this season, hard to come by.
Yeah, definitely. So just kudos from my view. Obviously, these are also the kind of goals that Dortmund like to concede. I just remember the way the Leipzig game went down and how easily they managed to pass the ball in behind our line of defense. So I'm really not complaining on this one, if I'm honest. And that all being said, I also thought that the final goal that Dortmund scored was really well crafted. Of course, since then, Marco Reus had come on, Bynoe-Gittens had come on for Sancho and Reus, and of course, Moukoko replaced Füllkrug, and I think Gio Reyna replaced Özcan, which then meant that Sabitzer sort of played in the more number 6 role, and I thought we then had a really creative midfield, and obviously a better flow to the game, and yeah, the way they created this goal was really nice too. A lot of passes, pre-assists for Gio Reyna, nice assists for Bynoe-Gittens, and Moukoko just pushing it over the line like a striker is supposed to. This is the sort of lineup the way Dortmund closed the game out is something that I would appreciate more often against teams like this. So I could definitely see Sabitzer starting against against Bochum in number 6, and then you have Reyna and or Brandt and Reus as a double 8 in front of that instead of playing Özcan, if I may say so frankly. But after the last podcast, I said that in my gut feeling, I don't see Dortmund selling Gio Reyna. How has that developed over the week with all the reports swirling around? Because I think you have a bit of a better overview than I have.
I mean, technically speaking, you might be correct because it's all pointing towards a loan deal at first, so the selling part might only happen in the summer. But yeah, I think at this point it's fairly safe to say that something is very likely to happen ahead of the match against Bochum on Sunday even. Apparently, Reyna himself has already given his green light to a move to Nottingham Forest in the Premier League. And then on today, Wednesday, there were suddenly reports out of Italy and France that Dortmund had also, in principle, I think, agreed a loan deal to Olympique Marseille, which I suppose is a somewhat more attractive sporting project at the moment because they are in the fight for European spots in France, whereas Nottingham Forest are in a relegation battle in the Premier League. And because of alleged breaking of PSR rules or sustainability rules in the Premier League, Forest are quite possibly going to get a points reduction at some point towards latter stages of the season. So given that they're only, I think, 4 points ahead of Luton, and Luton have a game in hand, that might become a regular relegation dogfight. And then I'm not sure, how Reyna fits into that, because we all know that he's a technically gifted player, likes to have the ball at his feet and all that, but I'm not sure that he's necessarily cut out for, Premier League relegation battle. We have to get a draw away at West Ham or whatever. I don't know if that's kind of his type of game, but obviously, him being American, having been born in England, the integration period is presumably going to be shorter at an English side. So I don't know where he's going to end up. I think Dortmund don't necessarily care, because they quite frankly know that he's not going to extend his contract that is only running until 25, as we talked about last week, and given that it's likely that he's leaving in the summer anyway, so for them it's probably a better proposition to have two sides vying for a signature, because that might drive the price up. I think the reports are still, a loan and then a buy option in the region of 15 to 20 million, which, as we talked about last week, might be a bit below, maybe market value, but that's how it goes with players who are only under contract for another 18 or even less than 18 months now.
Yeah, that is correct. I'm really intrigued about how this will all pan out, to be honest. I personally do believe that Dortmund probably still need Gio Reyna in the course of the season, even though on his position he does have a lot of competition. But equally, I do think a loan at this point would be better than him sort of rotting away and being more disregarded more often than not by his coaching staff. So from his perspective, a move I think makes a lot of sense. But yeah, I think for Dortmund, pretty good match day, especially with Leverkusen beating Leipzig in the last second. The Leverkusen streak does not end yet. Meanwhile, Dortmund have now equaled Leipzig's points record, and Stuttgart are also not far away anymore. So in that perspective, those two match days in 2024 really have helped Dortmund. Now on to the next game on Sunday, which of course is against Bochum, which Dortmund will host. I hope that Dortmund can, at least results-wise, continue where they left off, and of course improve on a footballing level. Lars, obviously we expect that from Dortmund, but can we expect it from this game anyway?
Who's to say? I mean,
you are.
Dortmund and Bochum, that has been a rather troublesome combination over the last couple of seasons since Bochum have come up again into the Bundesliga. But I think Bochum might be the most lopsided side in the Bundesliga between home and away performances this season, not necessarily from a points tally perspective, which I haven't looked up because it's Bochum and we don't have to go into too much detail for them, but still they are much better at home than away. I think I can fairly safely say that. And the positive for Dortmund is that Bochum, having beaten Stuttgart last week, on the one hand, as you alluded to, is good for Dortmund's Champions League prospect, especially considering Leipzig and Stuttgart play each other on the weekend. But also, those were points Bochum probably didn't really factor into the equation too solidly. So I think they are ahead of schedule, if you like, in terms of the relegation battle. So it's not like they are, hankering for every single point, and which, I mean, doesn't necessarily mean that they are going to take it easy at Dortmund, far from it probably. But I still think for that kind of side, there's always a bit more of an onus and urgency if, they are really in the thick of the relegation battle and whatnot. And it seems to me that like they are fairly safe this season, given that Cologne and Darmstadt and possibly Mainz are just a notch below the rest of the league from the game so far. So it seems to me like those three sides will probably play out, the relegation spot, maybe with Union Berlin also in the mix. And, a side like Bochum, uncharacteristically perhaps might be safe, after 29, 30, 31 match days. And I do think that stuff has an effect, but at the end of the day, Bochum like to be troublemakers for bigger clubs. That's kind of their DNA. And it's not been too long ago that they were troublemakers at Dortmund as well, if memory serves. So definitely not one to take, too lightly. But ultimately, it's the continuation of the first 2 games of the season where Dortmund are facing an opponent that is much inferior in terms of individual quality. And given that they have now started a good run, especially somewhat solid defensively for the most part, you would assume that that's going to continue.
Yeah, I'm really curious to see how Bochum are planning to screw up Dortmund's weekend this time, to be honest. I just hope that with the first home match and the magic of the Westfalenstadion, I know I've leaned on that maybe a little bit too heavy in the past, but I do believe that with Jadon Sancho back and with Ian Maatsen, of course, playing his first home game, I'm sort of hoping that at least those 2 players who have been difference maker, to be quite honest, so far this season, will once again make the difference. And I would say that Jadon Sancho in particular is a player that really can be trouble for defense like Bochum's. So it's not just like, good you have you back, but actually I do think that both these types of players will make a real difference in beating a team like Bochum. Now, do you by any chance know if Emre Can and Mats Hummels are expected to return to the lineup? Because that, of course, would imply some lineup changes here and there.
From what Ruhr-Nachrichten have reported on Wednesday afternoon, so quite a bit ahead of the late Sunday kickoff, they are expecting Hummels, Süle, and Can back in the squad, so almost full strength outside of Mecha, Riasson, and Adeyemi. And Aller, obviously, and Bensebaini might be back, actually, because Algeria have been eliminated from AFCON early, and Bensebaini, I think, was suspended for the final group match, so he hasn't played in a few days, so I would expect him to slot back into the squad relatively easily, so it might actually be a bit of a selection dilemma, even, deciding who's in the matchday squad, which is a welcome surprise, I suppose, because quite often Dortmund are scrounging up the last few guys, the Samuel Bambas and Henry Blanks of the world, just to make up a matchday squad, and now there might be a situation where...
I forgot to say it during the Köln segment, but shout out to Henry Blank again, because I thought, minus the first minute, he had a very solid performance too. Obviously, also not the biggest pressure on him, but we have seen worse debuts of under-23 center backs slotting in for Dortmund's injured center backs at halftime.
I believe you are talking about Soumaila Koulibaly. and that dastardly Stuttgart game late last season, which...
I don't want to talk about it.
Which, alongside the Bochum game and the match that shall not be named, yeah.
You could have just left it the way I said it and just moved past it, but yeah, no.
No, I'm a literal person, Stefan. I have to spell things out. No, I actually think Blank did really well.
You're also a literal salt strayer in my wounds.
And a wet blanket of reason, which is why people like our dynamic on this podcast, I suppose. No, I'm actually... we can make a point of congratulating Blank not only for a debut, but as you said, a fairly assured performance. I don't know how much of the blame for the one situation where he looked out of position even goes to him, because, as you said, that was like a minute or so into his Bundesliga debut. So
it was a sloppy giveaway by the guys in front of him,
and
who ought to know better.
Yeah, and from then on, I think he had I want to say 60 to 70 touches of the ball, because Dortmund obviously circulated possession late in the game quite a bit, but he didn't look out of place, which is the one thing that you always look for young guys making their debuts. You don't want them to, or you don't want to see that they're making their debut. And I don't think you could necessarily tell from that performance from Blanc. Whereas the situation you mentioned earlier, that was quite apparent that was a young player who quite possibly was a bit, in his head or whatever.
Yeah, for sure. Anyway, back to team selection against Bochum. I do expect if Hummels and Can are back, is that they will slot back into the team, and I do expect Ian Maatsen to continue play as a left back, even with Bensebaini returning. Has Aller even played at AFCON? Do you know? Because I think he was still nursing his ankle injury or whatever it was.
Yeah, and there's been some reports today that the injury might have been more severe than Dortmund have let on, which is a big shock. A big shock because Dortmund are
never happened before.
So forthcoming in their medicinal bulletins. He hasn't played.
The winners of the JD Power Award and for transparency, 2009 to 2023. I'm shocked.
Yeah.
I'm clutching my pearls.
I mean, he hasn't played at AFCON. Ivory Coast aren't eliminated yet because they've changed the format, so you can advance into the knockouts from third position in your group, and I think they are still alive technically in that, so he might not come back to Dortmund either way, but he also wouldn't arguably be able to play anyway. And I don't know. I mean, we talked at length about Moukoko last week. We know how they rate Füllkrug and what he brings to the table, so it's not like they are in desperate need of a third striking option as of right now.
Yeah, I would agree with you. Do you think we've discussed the last episode, of course, but do you think Moukoko has earned himself a start right now or no?
I don't know what changed from last week necessarily. I mean, yeah, he scored another goal off the bench, not quite as difficult, I suppose, because as you said earlier, was a very nice team move and he basically tapped it in from close range. Obviously, you still have to do that, and it seems like those types of things elude Füllkrug at this point, which, I think is kind of a bit of, a question of luck for strikers. Sometimes you just don't get into those situations, and when you are in that spot ahead of goal, maybe the pass doesn't come or whatever. I think if Füllkrug had, as said last week, if he had one of those games where, maybe he scores 2 lucky goals, then the tides turn and he's finding himself in the positions that Moukoko has gotten in off the bench. I still think we know that Moukoko is good as a joker, as we say in German football discussions. I don't think Füllkrug is a good super sub option, so I wouldn't necessarily change a thing. But what I will say is that Moukoko obviously has great memories at home against Bochum, because last year I think he sort of cemented his spot in the German World Cup squad with 2 banging goals against Bochum at home in a 3-0 win, which I think was late October, maybe early November, and quite possibly the last good game Dortmund played until 23. So I don't know how much Terzic plays into that kind of stuff, but if there were a situation where you said, hey, Moukoko has a good record against these, he's played well off the bench, he deserves a start, then maybe it would be against Bochum. But then again, I actually don't think you need to change too much. You are on a roll right now, thanks to, in large part, a soft schedule to start the new year. You don't have midweek fixtures right now, so you can train and play. So it's kind of the time to build momentum, and so I'm only expecting slight changes. Possibly Hummels, possibly Can, maybe Bynoe-Gittens starting ahead of Sancho, because bringing Sancho on might, turn things around during the game with the kind of reception he's going to get. That's possibly a consideration, and obviously you don't expect them to take Malen out, but Bynoe-Gittens kind of has been a regular starter, so that's something I'm looking at.
Yeah, me too. I'm always intrigued when I see the lineup to see which attacking midfielders, if you will, Terzic or the coaching staff have picked, and I'm fine either way, if I'm honest. I like Malen. I thought against Cologne, he had a couple of really annoying moments. So did Julian Brandt. But on the flip side, they are lethal and can also decide games. And with Jamie Bynoe-Gittens, I think he is also a natural difference maker with the skill set he has. So it's not like when he starts a game that I'm yearning for other players. So either way, it's nice to have a good amount of depth and players that can make the difference. And considering how desperate Dortmund are for points these days, I really hope that they can rely on their attacking prowess, because they do have to rely on individual skill quite a lot still, because it's not like they really have a tactical advantage more often than not. Let's put it this way. But anyhow, I don't want to ramble on too long, Lars, so I do want to keep it short. However, I do wanted to ask you real quick, do you actually think that Bayer Leverkusen are going to win the league as of now? Obviously, I think Bayern do have a makeup game today against, was it Mainz or was it Union Berlin? I forgot against.
Union.
Yeah. And they could cut the lead back to 4 points, but Leverkusen do look like they are on a roll. Still, of course, these teams will meet each other in February, I think, right?
Yeah.
So, long way to go. But I've watched the Bayern game against Bremen. They looked absolutely abject. Star piece of that abjectivity, which is probably not a word, was Rafael Guerreiro in central midfield. So the petty man in me enjoyed that a little bit. Of course, you can't take Bayern being abject for the rest of the entire season for granted. However, right now, as things look, Leverkusen do look like they might win the whole thing. Actually, what is your take on the Bundesliga title race, where we are staring at it from afar?
I mean, you can't but be very impressed by what Leverkusen are doing. I watched the game against Leipzig, and they were decidedly second best for most of the first half, much like they had been against Stuttgart earlier in the season. I think those two are the teams that gave Leverkusen the most to worry about this season. And I also watched the Bayern and Dortmund games, obviously, of Leverkusen. So that's also credit to Leipzig and Stuttgart, I suppose, which are Dortmund's more immediate competition this season. But still, Leverkusen pulled it out of the hat at the end of the day. Another late winner. And I think if we look back quite a few years now in, Dortmund's history, this is the kind of stuff that gets you going on runs that can lead to titles, especially given that Bayern seem to have some issues. I don't necessarily subscribe to the idea that they signed too many Tottenham players to win trophies anymore. but that's something that people have pointed out, and I mean,
I for sure have. I love
we
this.
We don't need reasons to feel schadenfreude.
Especially knowing Matthias reads these tweets as well.
Yeah, but we don't need much to feel schadenfreude towards Bayern, but I think it would be objectively funny if Harry Kane, especially Harry Kane, also Eric Dyer, but nobody really cares about Eric Dyer. But if Harry Kane moved to Bayern Munich in search of trophies, and for the first time in then 12 years, they failed to win the Bundesliga, and they are already out of the cup. They didn't win the Super Cup one day after he signed for the club. So it's Champions League or bust, possibly. I think it would be quite funny, objectively, if they didn't get anything out of this season. Obviously, it's very early to count Bayern out, especially given Leverkusen are now coming into a few personnel issues, suspensions, injuries. But then again, I mean, they are missing Boniface until April, and it's the kind of club that can go out and sign a proven veteran from La Liga in, what's his face, from Real Betis, Borja Iglesias.
Yeah, it was just at the tip of my tongue.
Yeah, they can sign him. Seems on a loan deal with an option to buy in the summer, and they already have Patrick Schick. but they can go out and sign someone like that. I think that's also speaks about the draw of the entire Leverkusen project, and not least of which, obviously, Xabi Alonso, which who is the next big thing in the managerial world. So you asked if I think, as of right now, will Leverkusen win the title? I have to say yes, I think so.
Yeah, I'm actually with you there, and because they objectively, to me, look like the better team than Bayern. If you watch both sides play football, I think Leverkusen look like a better team. I'll be honest. It just has more facets to it. They have more ways to beat you, and they even have added a set piece threat to their game, which is a new wrinkle as well. But as Xabi Alonso said after the game, this is something that obviously decides a lot of games, and Leverkusen were historically bad seasons ago in scoring any set piece goals, and the fact that they're doing that now is of course scary. So yeah, I'm honest. I'm a little annoyed that Bayern once again do seem gettable, but yeah, also shows that a lot of things have to go right, and yeah, maybe at the end Bayern somehow will still win the league again, but Leverkusen don't look like they're a fluke right now, and so I'm intrigued to at least follow this. I think it's adding some excitement to an otherwise not great Bundesliga season, if I may say so, from my own perspective. Anyway, Lars, thank you so much for coming on. Everyone out there, thank you for listening and tuning in, and we'll be back with another episode after the Bochum game. Until then, have a great weekend and goodbye.